Albert Einstein was the greatest physicist of the 20th century. His image and name are recognizable to almost everyone, along with his equation E equals mc2, which describes the relationship between energy and mass. His impact on science and intellectual thought during his lifetime was profound. This volume contains a collection of 67 essays written before 1935, when Einstein was at the height of his scientific powers but not yet known as the Sage of the Atomic Age. His stature in the world allowed him to express his views on social, philosophical, and political issues that were outside the field of physics. These essays established his early foray into these areas. Why are we so interested in all aspects of Einstein's philosophical positions and his thought processes? His theories of relativity and universal gravitation are generally regarded as inaccessible to the ordinary person. Yet we know that he was an original thinker who was able to see beyond the conventional scientific worldview of his age. What is remarkable is that Einstein's greatest discoveries belong to him alone. It is perhaps fitting that this volume is being published 100 years after Einstein settled the question of why the sky is blue. What we see is a giant intellect struggling as an ordinary person to make sense of the realities of life in the 20th century. Some of the essays are letters to friends and strangers. Others are well thought out, closely reasoned treatises on topics such as the meaning of life, religion and science, fascism and science, and Jewish ideals. The fundamental tenets of Einstein's philosophical positions are outlined clearly in several early essays. He indicated his indebtedness to Schopenhauer, the political ideal of democracy, his fundamental position of pacifism, and his understanding of his private religion. Einstein's position was that everybody acts not only under external compulsion but also in accordance with inner necessity. This enabled him to later mitigate his sense of responsibility for his role in the start of the atomic age. We see in the second essay, The World as I See It, a succinct outline of Einstein's personal, religious, and scientific philosophy. It was his sense of wonder of the mysteries of experience which drove him toward his profound scientific achievements. Much of the present volume represented a response to the world around him. A brief synopsis of the political events in Einstein's life until 1935 should help set the stage. Since Einstein had Swiss citizenship, his absolute pacifism would have been a natural ethical position. In 1914 he signed a petition against Germany's acts of aggression leading up to the First World War. Soon after 1918 he accepted German citizenship in order to support the German Democratic Party and became an unofficial spokesman for the Weimar Republic. He felt such a strong association with Germany that in 1921 he refused to attend the Solvay Congress in Belgium because other German scientists were excluded. He was very encouraged by the formation of the fledgling League of Nations in 1922, but was very troubled by the League's inability to respond to France's occupation of the Ruhr. In 1922, he joined the Committee Intellectual Cooperation, which was part of the League of Nations. It was within this context that he developed a correspondence with Sigmund Freud, to Sigmund Freud. In the period from 1922 through 1932 he broke with the League of Nations 3 times, the last being final. This was a testament to the conflict that he felt between his idealism and the reality of the political arena in which such an organization must work. An example appeared in his essay A Farewell. After the First World War, Einstein was a willing associate of Zionism. In March 1921, Einstein made the first of many visits to America. His main purpose was to raise funds for the establishment of the planned Hebrew University of Jerusalem, as he outlines in addresses on the reconstruction in Palestine, which were written at different times and delivered in different places. It was on this first visit that he received the massive public adulation that marked the transformation of a great scientist into a controversial and historic 20th-century icon and public figure. Einstein characterized himself as a supporter of cultural and social Zionism, but not political Zionism, thus attempting to stay true to his distrust of nationalism. He wanted the Jews to solve the problem of living side by side with our brother the Arab in an open, generous and worthy manner. Addresses on the reconstruction in Palestine too. This position of a pluralistic state was at direct odds to the Zionist political ideal. Einstein did not have the unquestioned support of the Jewish community in America, and his backing of the Zionist movement was criticized by many who felt that Jews should assimilate to society in America. In 1933 the world was just coming out of the Great Depression. The political stability of Europe was in question. In America, prohibition, which Einstein felt lowered the prestige of the government, Some Notes on My American Impressions, was about to be repealed and change was in the air. Anti-Semitism was developing in Germany. Fascism was on the rise in Italy. Einstein responded to these developments and weighed in without equivocation. He was still profoundly hopeful that Germany would see the error of her ways, and was reluctant to criticize Germany since he was a Jew and a German citizen. In his essay A Reply we can see the application of his personal philosophy to an issue where he clearly felt a strong sense of responsibility to speak out but did not. His visits occasioned the essay Thanks to America in 1931 as he was leaving, followed by Some Notes on My American Impressions. It was not until 1932 that he was offered a post at Princeton. It became obvious to him that he could no longer remain in Berlin, and that year he left Germany, never to return. In 1933 he renounced his German citizenship and settled permanently in America. What particularly struck him about America was the American patronage of science. One can see why he readily agreed to adopt America as his new homeland. One of the more fascinating aspects of Einstein's writings is his discussion of religion. In Religion and Science, first appearing in the New York Times in 1930, he outlined 3 stages of religious development. Stage 1 was fear and the concomitant belief that propitiating a divine being will secure safety and prosperity. Stage 2 was more developed and came with a moral basis and codes of action. Stage 3 was based on cosmic religious feelings with no anthropomorphic God. This was Einstein's religion. It was in this essay that Einstein ascribed the highest kind of religious feelings to Spinoza, who exerted the most influence on his worldview. The economic and social essays of Einstein found in part to reflect his almost wholesale adoption of the current socialist and anti-capitalist views of the 1930s. They were based primarily on his notion of surplus value of labor. These views are currently out of favor with the pro-market, capitalist economists of today. Einstein's pacifism was particularly germane to the events that occurred after the push to develop the atomic bomb. In Part 2 he outlined his position, which was in stark contrast to his letter to President Roosevelt in 1939, urging the development of the atomic bomb, which forever changed the relationship between science and politics. Einstein's connection to all things German and, in particular, to the scientific community in Berlin, through his appointment to the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physics, made it very painful for him to give up his German citizenship. In 1933 he even found it difficult to associate himself with the French Manifesto against anti-Semitism in Germany, which is discussed in a reply. Throughout his years in America, Einstein sought friendship and association with German Jews. Through this connection he developed a deep friendship with Dr. Dagobert de Runes, the founder of Philosophical Library, who wrote his doctoral dissertation on Spinoza. Many of Einstein's essays were subsequently published by Philosophical Library, which is now reissuing this volume. Neil Berger, Associate Professor Emeritus of Mathematics, University of Illinois at Chicago. August 2010. In his biography of Einstein, Mr. H. Gordon Garbedian relates that an American newspaper man asked the great physicist for a definition of his theory of relativity in one sentence. Einstein replied that it would take him 3 days to give a short definition of relativity. He might well have added that unless his questioner had an intimate acquaintance with mathematics and physics, the definition would be incomprehensible. To the majority of people, Einstein's theory is a complete mystery. Their attitude towards Einstein is like that of Mark Twain towards the writer of a work on mathematics. Here was a man who had written an entire book of which Mark could not understand a single sentence. Einstein, therefore, is great in the public eye partly because he has made revolutionary discoveries which cannot be translated into the common tongue. We stand in proper awe of a man whose thoughts move on heights far beyond our range, whose achievements can be measured only by the few who are able to follow his reasoning and challenge his conclusions. There is, however, another side to his personality. It is revealed in the addresses, letters, and occasional writings brought together in this book. These fragments form a mosaic portrait of Einstein the man. Each one is, in a sense, complete in itself. It presents his views on some aspect of progress, education, peace, war, liberty, or other problems of universal interest. Their combined effect is to demonstrate that the Einstein we can all understand is no less great than the Einstein we take on trust. Einstein has asked nothing more from life than the freedom to pursue his researches into the mechanism of the universe. His nature is of rare simplicity and sincerity. He always has been, and he remains, genuinely indifferent to wealth and fame and the other prizes so dear to ambition. At the same time he is no recluse, shutting himself off from the sorrows and agitations of the world around him. Himself familiar from early years with the handicap of poverty and with some of the worst forms of man's inhumanity to man, he has never spared himself in defense of the weak and the oppressed. Nothing could be more unwelcome to his sensitive and retiring character than the glare of the platform and the heat of public controversy, yet he has never hesitated when he felt that his voice or influence would help to redress a wrong. History, surely, has few parallels with this introspective mathematical genius who labored unceasingly as an eager champion of the rights of man. Albert Einstein was born in 1879 at Ulm. When he was 4 years old, his father, who owned an electrochemical works, moved to Munich, and 2 years later the boy went to school, experiencing a rigid, almost military, type of discipline and also the isolation of a shy and contemplative Jewish child among Roman Catholics, factors which made a deep and enduring impression. From the point of view of his teachers, he was an unsatisfactory pupil, apparently incapable of progress in languages, history, geography, and other primary subjects. His interest in mathematics was roused, not by his instructors, but by a Jewish medical student, Max Talmy, who gave him a book on geometry, and so set him upon a course of enthusiastic study which made him, at the age of 14, a better mathematician than his masters. At this stage also he began the study of philosophy, reading and rereading the words of Kant and other metaphysicians. Business reverses led the elder Einstein to make a fresh start in Milan, thus introducing Albert to the joys of a freer, sunnier life than had been possible in Germany. Necessity, however, made this holiday a brief one, and after a few months of freedom the preparation for a career began. It opened with an effort, backed by a certificate of mathematical proficiency given by a teacher in the gymnasium at Munich, to obtain admission to the Polytechnic Academy at Zurich. A year passed in the study of necessary subjects which he had neglected for mathematics, but once admitted, the young Einstein became absorbed in the pursuit of science and philosophy and made astonishing progress. After 5 distinguished years at the Polytechnic he hoped to step into the post of assistant professor, but found that the kindly words of the professors who had stimulated the hope did not materialize. Then followed a weary search for work, 2 brief interludes of teaching, and a stable appointment as examiner at the Confederate Patent Office at Bern. Humdrum as the work was, it had the double advantage of providing a competence and of leaving his mind free for the mathematical speculations which were then taking shape in the theory of relativity. In 1905 his first monograph on the theory was published in a Swiss scientific journal, the Annalen der Physik. Zurich awoke to the fact that it possessed a genius in the form of a patent office clerk, promoted him to be a lecturer at the university, and 4 years later in 1909 installed him as professor. His next appointment was, in 1911, at the University of Prague, where he remained for 18 months. Following a brief return to Zurich, he went, early in 1914, to Berlin as a professor in the Prussian Academy of Sciences and director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Theoretical Physics. The period of the Great War was a trying time for Einstein, who could not conceal his ardent pacifism, but he found what solace he could in his studies. Later events brought him into the open and into many parts of the world, as an exponent not only of pacifism but also of world disarmament and the cause of Jewry. To a man of such views, as passionately held as they were by Einstein, Germany under the Nazis was patently impossible. In 1933 Einstein made his famous declaration, "As long as I have any choice, I will stay only in a country where political liberty, toleration, and equality of all citizens before the law are the rule." For a time he was a homeless exile after offers had come to him from Spain and France and Britain. He settled in Princeton as professor of mathematical and theoretical physics, happy in his work, rejoicing in a free environment, but haunted always by the tragedy of war and oppression. The World as I See It, in its original form, includes essays by Einstein on relativity and cognate subjects. For reasons indicated above, these have been omitted in the present edition. The object of this reprint is simply to reveal to the general reader the human side of one of the most dominating figures of our day. The world as I see it. The meaning of life. What is the meaning of human life, or of organic life altogether? To answer this question at all implies a religion. Is there any sense then, you ask, in putting it? I answer, the man who regards his own life and that of his fellow creatures as meaningless is not merely unfortunate but almost disqualified for life. The world as I see it. What an extraordinary situation is that of us mortals. Each of us is here for a brief sojourn, for what purpose he knows not, though he sometimes thinks he feels it. But from the point of view of daily life, without going deeper, we exist for our fellow men in the first place, for those on whose smiles and welfare all our happiness depends, and next for all those unknown to us personally with whose destinies we are bound up by the tie of sympathy. 100 times every day I remind myself that my inner and outer life depend on the labors of other men, living and dead, and that I must exert myself in order to give in the same measure as I have received and am still receiving. I am strongly drawn to the simple life and am often oppressed by the feeling that I am engrossing an unnecessary amount of the labor of my fellow men. I regard class differences as contrary to justice and, in the last resort, based on force. I also consider that plain living is good for everybody, physically and mentally. In human freedom in the philosophical sense I am definitely a disbeliever. Everybody acts not only under external compulsion but also in accordance with inner necessity. Schopenhauer's saying, that a man I can do as he will, but not will as he will, has been an inspiration to me since my youth up, and a continual consolation and unfailing wellspring of patience in the face of the hardships of life, my own and others. This feeling mercifully mitigates the sense of responsibility which so easily becomes paralyzing, and it prevents us from taking ourselves and other people too seriously. It conduces to a view of life in which humor, above all, has its due place. To inquire after the meaning or object of one's own existence or of creation generally has always seemed to me absurd from an objective point of view. And yet everybody has certain ideals which determine the direction of his endeavors and his judgments. In this sense I have never looked upon ease and happiness as ends in themselves. Such an ethical basis I call more proper for a herd of swine. The ideals which have lighted me on my way and time after time given me new courage to face life cheerfully, have been truth, goodness, and beauty. Without the sense of fellowship with men of like mind, of preoccupation with the objective, the eternally unattainable in the field of art and scientific research, life would, have seemed to me empty. The ordinary objects of human endeavor, property, outward success, luxury, have always seemed too contemptible. My passionate sense of social justice and social responsibility has always contrasted oddly with my pronounced freedom from the need for direct contact with other human beings and human communities. I gang my own gait and have never belonged to my country, my home, my friends, or even my immediate family. With my whole heart in the face of all these ties, I have never lost an obstinate sense of detachment, of the need for solitude, a feeling which increases with the years. One is sharply conscious, yet without regret, of the limits to the possibility of mutual understanding and sympathy with one's fellow creatures. Such a person no doubt loses something in the way of geniality and lightheartedness. On the other hand, he is largely independent of the opinions, habits, and judgments of his fellows and avoids the temptation to take his stand on such insecure foundations. My political ideal is that of democracy. Let every man be respected as an individual and no man idolized. It is an irony of fate that I myself have been the recipient of excessive admiration and respect from my fellows through no fault, and no merit, of my own. The cause of this may well be the desire, unattainable for many, to understand the one or two ideas to which I have with my feeble powers attained through ceaseless struggle. I am quite aware that it is necessary for the success of any complex undertaking that one man should do the thinking and directing and in general bear the responsibility. But the led must not be compelled, they must be able to choose their leader. An autocratic system of coercion, in my opinion, soon degenerates. For force always attracts men of low morality, and I believe it to be an invariable rule that tyrants of genius are succeeded by scoundrels. For this reason I have always been passionately opposed to systems such as we see in Italy and Russia today. The thing that has brought discredit upon the prevailing form of democracy in